Let's get miniature! We made a miniature world. Wow, your friend! No more. Where's that super armored killing machine again? Hey, Roger, great to see you, man! Oh, well, yeah, you're just a piece of plastic. I know. It's cool. Hey, great to have you with me today on the DM's Craft. This is a special episode that combines two of my favorite things: crafting terrain and crafting stories, crafting adventures, all right? So we're going to combine the two in this episode, and I'm going to show you this really cool vehicle I made for this fantasy vehicle I made for my Quest Giver's adventure called On the Run. So this monstrous machine, mechanical, magical, monstrous machine is chasing you down this mountain, right? And it is, terrifying. There's hags on it. There's these things called Drex, which are like these little goblin-like creatures inside, like a hamster's powering this thing. And this thing is frightening, right? As the hags are chucking magic at you, and this big wheel is about to squish you. So this is a super fun adventure and a cool craft. I really wanted to make something spectacular for this craft. So let's go to my table and I'll show you how cool this came out.
You know how you'll see something and suddenly you'll just get inspiration for a craft? Well, that's what happened to me with this death wheel. I wanted to make the wheel interesting and unusual, and I saw these rolls of tape at the Dollar Tree, so they were only $1 each, and I thought, oh, I could do this interesting kind of layered idea you can see on the picture here, where the smaller, wider roll is in the center and the larger, shorter width rolls are on the outside. So I thought that'd be a really interesting design, and that's what I decided to go with. I had the wheels, but I needed some texture. So what I did is I took some styrofoam from a clamshell and I cut it up into strips that I could use to cover the wheels and give them a nice texture. So first I segmented the bits into different planks that would be on the wheel, and then I took this embossing tool and just pushed into it to get the wooden texture. And this is a really nice, cheap way that you can do that. I wanted to add some metal banding to the wheels to make it look like it would hold the wheel together. So what I used is this glossy cardstock, and this is just from a donut box. What I like about the glossy part is that the paint doesn't soak into it, and it looks more like a piece of metal as opposed to like a piece of cardstock with a rough surface. That smooth surface gives it a nice look. It looks like metal. You'll notice here also that I'm dragging my blade along it. That'll give a little bit of damage and scuff marks to it, and that I've segmented it into squares. And the reason I did that was because I'm going to put spikes on this, and I want an easy way to measure where the spikes will go when I glue them on. Once you get your styrofoam all textured, you just cut them out and hot glue them to the tape rolls. I just glued the cardstock banding in the middle of the wheel and I was good to go. Used hot glue on that. I had my wood texture and banding on the wheels, but I still had a problem because the outside of the wheels didn't have any texture and it was still a roll of tape. So I had to figure out how I would fix that, and I used my modeling paste. I love this stuff. It's great. You can find my links below in my Amazon store. So I just painted a thin coat of this on here on the edge of the wheel, or on the edge of the tape roll, and then I just dragged a toothpick through it towards the center to give it like a wood-like texture, and that really worked out fantastic. This stuff is great. It dries hard but flexible, and it's just great for all kinds of projects like this. Kind of the lore of the death wheel is that there are these creatures called Drex that are running inside like hamsters, and the Drex are kind of these goblin-like creatures, so they're being controlled by their masters and they're running in there like hamsters. And so I imagine that they're kind of in the center, that large area of the wheel, and then I just had to assemble these, so I just hot glued them all together, and you can see we got a really interesting look with the two outer larger parts and the much wider inner part. You know, of course with crafting you can do everything by hand, but sometimes it's just easier just to use a prefab product, especially if it's not very expensive. And I decided to use these as the caps for the wheel, so I wouldn't have to cut out perfect circles to fit, and they already had the wood texture on them, so that was perfect. I want to have a forecastle, which is kind of the command deck of the wheel, and magic users sit on there, control the wheel with magic, and blast enemies and that kind of thing. You can also have plenty of rooms for other troops. So I made the height of the wall a little taller than you might expect for a miniature, because the miniatures are going to hide behind it, and I've got to have kind of a window, a crenellation in the front where the driver can look out, right? So that was kind of the idea with this. So I made that 1.5 inches tall, and then I made the base 3 inches by 4 inches. So I just cut that out of thick cardstock that you can find at my Amazon store. Once I cut that out, I just measured my clamshell pieces out, did the same thing, drew lines through it, used the embossing tool and got the wood texture on it, and then just cut pieces out that would cover up the cardstock and give it a nice texture, nice wooden texture. I got the forecastle all glued together with my hot glue gun, and I didn't put texture on the inside yet. I used that till last so that I could just put it on there and then measure with the differential from the bottom, already in it. That way I didn't have to measure that out, pre-measure that out. I could just measure it out after and then just glue it in there, and it's all set, all good to go. I used those prefab wooden discs before. Now I'm going to use these doll stands, these wooden doll stands, and they've already got the wood texture on them, so it's perfect. So I'm going to glue one on the wheel and then one on the forecastle, and that's going to make it so that I can link the two together. I decided to add another detail. I love these gears that you can get. You can get them in bulk. I have a link below in my Amazon store, but you can get them in bulk just about any craft place, and these are great to add to projects, particularly if there's some kind of pseudo-mechanical thing like this is. So I decided to add some detail with these cogs onto the places where the two wheels will connect. I took a delve into my wooden bits box, and I found these interesting shapes that I'm going to use on the forecastle to give it some detail. I added the strut out of my bit box, and say it with me, what did I use? E6000, that's right. It's great for gluing various materials together like wood and metal, so it'll be perfect for this application. Okay, I want to warn you about a big no-no. Do not use the E6000 on the foam or it will melt it, okay? I used my glue gun on this, and I glued the wooden bits to the forecastle, but I also used some of the wooden bits to cover up the edges where the foam meets the cardstock, and you can use that to cover that up, and it looks great. I glued some plastic spikes on. Wow, that really transforms the piece. I did glue these on with E6000 because you'll notice that none of the pieces are touching the styrofoam. They're all touching something else, so it's okay to use the E6000, which works great on plastic and other materials. Beads can be used for great detail, and I glued some to the corners as well as the center of the wall on each side. Then on top of each bead, I glued a plastic spike, so this thing is going to even be more wicked looking. So really cool. Wait till we get this painted. It's going to look great. I wanted to add some more detail to the center of the wheel, so I added these teardrop shapes. I just white glued those on the wood, and I decided to add more bigger struts to the center, so I just glued the same pieces as the first one to each other with the white glue, and I got like a wider looking strut, like a compound strut. I also added some cogs to the outside of the struts to make it look like it's going through the strut, like it's bolted into the strut. A strip of donut box white glued to the center of the struts like a banding bar, and then I added some rhinestones for the bolts that were holding it on. I wanted to add one last little detail to the forecastle, so I cut a skull in half with this blade. Be careful when you do this kind of stuff. Then I E6000'd it to a piece of wood I had that looked like a shield. I thought that was really neat. And then I glued that to the top of the forecastle on the other wood pieces. So a really cool look. I think that really topped it off. My last little detail was a cosmetic thing. I used some modeling paste around the window in the front to blend the layers together of the cardstock and the foam, so you don't see the separate layers. It just looks like one piece. I want to spray paint it for the most part, but you really can't because the foam would melt, so that's a big problem. So to strengthen and color in the foam, I used black gesso mixed with Mod Podge, matte Mod Podge, and I painted all the foam areas with it. So not only does it strengthen it, it actually protects it from the spray paint. It was actually a pretty simple matter to paint the thing. I just painted all the wooden areas with a dark brown and all the metal and banded areas with a gunmetal. Once the base coat was dry, I just gave it a once over of my black wash, and that is just water, black gesso. I really like the black pigment of the gesso. It has floor wax, glossy floor wax, and a few drops of dish soap. And that makes a really great wash that goes in all the cracks and crevices. To finish up the paint job, I used a mushroom brown, which is kind of this muted brown, and it looks great. It makes it look like old wood. I discovered that the color shifting black from plaid is really great for distressing. You can see on the metal banding here that I added some of it on there, and it really makes a great look for distressing and discolorations. Variation of color can give your piece some interest, so I use this tan as another dry brush, and I use this scruffy brush. It's a nice application because it kind of breaks up the color onto the piece, and it looks like worn wood. I really like that effect. This is a little bright right now as I'm putting it on, but it will darken up as it dries, so take that into consideration when you paint. One thing you'll notice on the bottom here is I didn't have the spikes go all the way around. That way the wheel can stand up on its own without having any kind of stand, to stand on. If I put the spikes on, it would be sticking up off the table, so I decided not to put the spikes on the whole way around. Now let's take a look at the completed piece with the troops in the back so you can see how it looks all together and ready for the tabletop.
If you'd like to play the adventure featuring this death wheel, check out questgivers.com. The module name is On the Run, but the module is also featured in a 12-part campaign that's called the North Road Campaign. 12 adventures, 4 short quests, and an epic campaign that is ready to go right to your table. It is system neutral, so you can use it in any system you like. That's what I really love about it. And I'm really proud of these adventures, and I think you're going to have fun running them. So check out questgivers.com to pick that up. I would like to give a round of applause for these people for helping to bring you the DM's Craft. Thank you very much for your generous support. That's a lot of names. Thank you so much.